Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today here at X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. My name is Miles, and I'm here not just to scratch the surface of business leadership, innovation, and transformation. We go deep, ISO certified deep. Now, leadership. It's a word that gets tossed around more than a stress ball in a high pressure boardroom. But today, we're going beyond the buzzwords. We're pulling back the curtain once again on what real leadership and governance look like in an age where sustainability, compliance, and continuous improvement aren't just check boxes, they're survival skills. And who better to explore this with than a man who's practically written the manual on the subject? Actually, he has. Our featured guest today is no stranger to the X-Rays family, and every single time he's here, he raises the bar a little higher. Under his leadership, his company has been championing ISO 26000 standards and turning workforce capability into a strategic superpower. He's a proof that when you train people right, you don't just build careers, you build responsible industries. Back here to the show, the ever insightful, always ahead of the curve, the birthday boy, managing director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, Ian Erskine. Happy birthday, Ian. Beautiful morning to you.
And thank you so much, Miles. And I will let everyone into a little secret. I was just shared the lighting of a candle and a special wish by Miles. And again, well done. And again, I will share with the people, like I said to you, Miles, one of your very much strengths is your lovely smile.
Thank
That
you.
also, more importantly, that smile generates that happiness and glow in your face. And as I said, it just gives people the confidence, the comfort that the person that they're talking to is very genuine, very ethical, and a lovely person.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Ian. And as always, it's a pleasure to have you here on X-Rays, especially on your birthday. So I won't waste any of your time. Let's decode and get deeper on how you've been equipping today's leaders and grooming the ones of tomorrow. And in today's fast evolving world, Ian, where agility is often the name of the game, what does leadership and commitment really mean within the context of your ISO certified CBMS online manual, especially in setting the tone at the top when it comes to customer focus and creating a culture of compliance?
Well, it sets the tone completely, and it is also important because if we don't have leaders within an organisation, and if even in our inner self, if we can't lead, basically, ultimately, we fail. Because when we talk about leadership, we talk about the ability to be able to bring people up through the organisation. And it's interesting when you think about it, because the way we tie it in, we actually tie it in to the family unit. We talk to the parents, the mothers and the fathers, right? And we talk about how they bring their children up, and that's leadership, right?
Hmm?
They teach them from a young age to learn from experiences, learn from example, and you learn from your mistakes.
Right.
And this is where quite often we find today is that part of the side of the equation is often tried to be ironed out or smoothed away, but it's very much part of life. Okay. We grow up in a world where we must understand we need to learn from our mistakes, and that's where we become leaders, so that you can actually then turn into being a mentoring. Okay. And this is a very big part of an organisation, is that when leaders or when employees join an organisation, that's when the profile starts to be developed. And that's where we look at the onboarding, and then we look at the position description of each of their roles, right? And this is also important because quite often, and I had this yesterday, we were talking about this within each person's role and our ability to be able to do that skill assessment on each of their tasks. Now, to do that correctly, that's just not a matter of ticking boxes, right? that actually is a matter where you have to be there in person
Mm-hmm.
and observe that task being performed. So we were speaking about, as I said, we were speaking about that at the audit that I had yesterday, and the organisation are so switched on because they have both their directors, their senior managers, basically are out in the field all the time. Now,
Uh-huh.
this organisation is a small family-run business, right? But they do town development and things like that. So they develop the infrastructure, okay, the curb and guttering and things like that, right from the word go. And yes, so this is where it's very, very important. Leaders are not born. Leaders are people that are trained to lead.
Uh-huh.
You
Very
often hear that people say he or they were born to lead. That's actually not true
well.
because as you grow up in life, as I said before, you learn from your mistakes. You
Mhm.
also learn very heavily from your successes, right? And one of the things that we try to do with leadership is basically concentrate more on not so much the person's strength, but the person's weaknesses. And we'll go a little bit further when we talk about roles and responsibilities, right? We'll go a little bit further and deeper into that. And
Uh-huh.
this is where we've made, well, in some respects, a startling discovery, right? And we spoke about that before we came on air. But I think it will be very evident as we get towards the end of this episode that we'll be going to do this segment of leadership in two parts. So the second part will be next week, right?
Uh-huh.
But the first part, we're really only going to start to touch the surface.
Okay, great. What a powerful reminder, Ian. A healthy culture starts with conduct at the top, and I agree that learning is at the center of it. You're completely right. If leadership isn't aligned, you can forget about rising results. So let's build on that. Aside from training leaders, your governance model seems to rewire how they think as well. How does your approach to compliance governance, Ian, through both the training content and governance structure encourage leaders to go beyond box ticking, as you said, and start making ethical, sustainable, and performance driven decisions?
Well, this is where it starts again from the very beginning. And again, we've said this many times. It very much starts from the point of view where everyone must understand they or we are accountable for our own action. Okay. Now, once we get that sorted, we then have to look at their accountabilities in reference to their task descriptions and how they perform within an organisation. And then we actually then step back and then we say, okay, we ask them to do what we call a Hogan leadership profile. Okay. It's well known throughout the world. It's one of the leading determinants of people's ability to demonstrate their leadership skills on an ongoing basis. And it's one of the leading tools in the world that is used to the point where ongoing those skills are consistently assessed
Uh-huh.
and ongoing they improve. And
Right.
that's where we talk about the SWOT analysis, okay? And it's quite amazing when we actually get the candidate to do a SWOT analysis on themselves when they start the Hogan leadership profile. We look at their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats. We align that to the tools that we've used within Hogan. But then what we actually then do is we get them to step back when they have their reports done. The first thing we get them to do is actually discuss it with their wives or their partners or their girlfriends, right? Because quite often I get the notion from them when they first read it, they said, this is not really me. And that's when I say, well, have you discussed it with your wife or your partner or your girlfriend? No. And I said, okay, go away, have a couple of days, discuss it with your loved one, right? and then come back and we'll organise where we then take that to where it aligns with the business's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And quite often they'll come back and say, well, I was very quickly put in my place. And I now understand, yes, that is one of my weaknesses
Uh-huh.
where I tend, and this is quite common, where they'll come back to me and they'll say, I do tend not to listen, but I don't do it deliberately. I do it because it's myself. I've got a rigid way of doing things, and I've got that fixed in my mind and all my mannerisms, the way I do my jobs and my tasks, right? And when I'm asking a question to an employee, I've got it rigidly set in my mind that this is the only way it can be done, and that's as far as it goes. Whereas what we educate and mentor people through is the ability to know they have to, when they're asking a question or discussing things with an employee, they have to have that attitude of it has to be a blank book, because I demonstrate to them quite often what they may hear after asking the question. It may be completely opposite what they would have
Uh-huh.
expected,
Right.
right? Now, then that's where we train them. Okay, so they're completely different, completely left field, right? You then ask a couple of questions, then all of a sudden it becomes clear, and this is where their strength increases, because they are able then to say back to the person they're talking to or communicating to, they
Mhm.
can say, well, that's amazing. I had never thought of doing it that way. Let's do it, because I think you're going to demonstrate to me you have a way of doing it to improve that process.
Mhm.
And that's how it's amazing how new people can come into an organisation. They can look at a process that has been done for years, right? They can come in new. They have an outside way of looking at different things. And it's quite amazing when I often get the managing director comes back to me and
Mhm.
said, we've got a new lady at the desk this morning. She'll demonstrate to you, yes, we've had to change our processes, but our
Mhm.
processes now are absolutely brilliant,
Mhm.
simply because new persons come in, looked at it a different way, right? And as I said, taking that back to as I was explaining, this is how, when you ask a question, you mustn't have a preconceived idea in your brain of the answer, right?
Uh-huh.
But that also is an issue, because that's our brain. Our brain understands how we operate,
Mhm.
right? But our brain, as I've demonstrated many times, is quite clever.
Right.
If it can be demonstrated, it can be improved, it will
Mhm.
take that improvement on board, and away you go.
Mhm. Well, that's a great explanation, Iyad. Exactly. Governance is not a glove compartment document. As I learned from you, it's a mindset. And it's also
Yes,
essential to have the SWOT analysis, because apart from raising standards, ethical leadership sets the standard in this case. And
exactly.
speaking Thank you. And speaking of structure, your CVMS manual goes into serious detail around defining roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So, from your experience, what's the real world impact of clearly assigning those roles from the governing body right down to frontline personnel in terms of accountability, agility, and yes, industry wide sustainability?
Okay, well, I guess the interesting one, it's always been part of my makeup. And this is something my late dad always taught me. He always taught me you have to lead as if that's the way you're doing the job anyway. So you lead by example, right? So you've heard the analogy, you walk the talk, right? And I often say to senior managers and the executive team that they have to demonstrate that they're able to understand what that person's doing in every single one of their tasks. They have to be able to step in and demonstrate they understand that level of discipline that is being adhered to by the employee. And a clear example of this is, again, going back to the audit I did yesterday, was that the senior directors, when I asked them, it would, can you demonstrate to me when you actually go on site how you're actually looking at your employees fulfilling their tasks? And one of the key things that we try to get people to understand and partake in is, as we all now have mobile phones, and providing it's not down a mine shaft or it's not in a gas depot where it's highly explosive and you can use your phone. And these guys said, Mr. Ian, we know exactly where you're coming from. When I go out on site, I let everyone know that I'm coming, and they all know when I have my phone out and I'm taking a little video recording, right, of them doing their job, right? They always know I'm not looking for fault. What I'm taking that video for is to understand that they are doing the right job and prove that as a little video clip as demonstrating that they are undertaking their task in the very best and possible way. Now, it's interesting, and this also came out in the audit yesterday, was that one of the directors was able to say, well, I've actually taken that little video clip. Then when I was playing it back before I put it into the documentation and stored it, there was a slight change in the way I had figured or had anticipated that the job was being done. Now, he said, mirroring what he said, I looked at it and I said, wow, that's different, but wow, that's a great way of doing it. I had never thought that that was the way that they were now doing it, but hey, presto.
Yeah.
And that's where, and again, we make the point, you take your little video clips of the task being undertaken to clearly demonstrate that the task being done correctly and demonstrating to them that as an employee, they are working to the very best of their ability and they are doing the job correctly. You're not doing it to look for fault. You're doing it to demonstrate and prove to them beyond a doubt that that is a job being done well. And that's where we can step a little bit back and also tie in our ISO skills assessment. That's where our ISO skills assessment comes in, because all these little skill assessment videos are all recorded on the profile of the employee. They're there at any given time, and when the employee sits down with their senior manager at the end of the year, because most organisations do an annual review of a person's performance over that past 12 months, right? And it's very important for those reviews, as I always say, for those reviews to be done by a 360-degree process. So it's just not the managing director or the senior manager interviewing and checking on the way the employee performs, but it also gives the employee the ability to be able to ask questions of their senior manager, right? And also, in effect, they're reviewing their senior manager. So it's what we call a 360-degree profile between the senior manager and the employee. And that's where the performance appraisal becomes absolutely critical in the performance of the organisation ongoing, so as to ensure not only sustained success, but also traction, and enables them to demonstrate that they are economically viable. And also this will lead demonstrated again in our next episode, but I'll just quickly touch on it now. This leads back to what the organisation has put in place, is an employee award scheme on an annual basis. So, and it awards meritocracy. And this is something, again, we have demonstrated throughout and within our platform through the ISO skills assessments and our verification process. That's actually what it's done for, because people don't get trained for nothing. People don't demonstrate that they're capable for no reason. They demonstrate they're capable because that enables them to demonstrate through success of what they're doing, which enables the organisation to increase its profits, enables its organisation or the business itself, as I said, to remain viable,
Mm-hmm.
economically sustainable, sustained success, and continued traction and
Mm-hmm.
economic viability so that all employees can feel valued, right?
Mm-hmm.
All employees can be fulfilled beautifully within themselves. So they come to work happy and they go home happy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that's one of the key things that we try to get an organisation to keep track of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to demonstrate that it's now gone are the days that you just have a look at an organisation's organisational chart. What you need to be able to see in that organisation chart is the position descriptions, their tasks, their key deliverables, and in the industry, what we call it KPPI, key personal performance indicators, and those indicators of the people must align with the indicators of the business, because as we've said so many times, a business does not exist unless it has people in it rowing at the same pace or even a little bit faster than the organisation would expect, because if they're rowing a little bit faster and achieving above their capabilities, driving meritocracy, the business will continue to improve.
Right. There's always room for improvement and a space
Yes,
and
yes,
chance to contribute more value to the organizations they're with. And you're
so
right, it's
true.
easier to document, review, and demonstrate the things going on and how people are actually performing or how have they been performing through a video. And with that scenario, Ian, I think it just means you've done your job pretty well. Clear, because clear rules do more than prevent chaos. They enable confidence. And you're right, we should all lead by example indeed. And I'd like us to shift this into something you've been championing for quite some time now, Ian, systems integration. ACI Global puts significant emphasis on integrated systems, even AI enhanced risk policies. So, how does aligning leadership responsibilities with these systems help in building not just resilient organizations, but also socially responsible and future ready ones?
Actually, that's a very good one, and I think we're just about getting out of time. So this will lead into part two of this series,
Uh-huh.
and this is where it becomes key, because again, we go back to the people themselves when they first come on board, when they start with their new organisation. There has to be a key alignment of values. There has to be a key alignment of people's passion.
Mhm.
There has to be a key alignment right the way back to ethics, practicality, and how they actually do things. Because if they don't align, everything ultimately will not work and it will fail. And this is where it becomes key to ensure that we're understanding compliance. And this is something that was driven home again with the audit I did yesterday, where there is a clear understanding of conforming to achieve compliance, not being forced to comply because there's a big stick hanging over you. If you do something wrong, you'll be fined or you'll lose your job or something like that. There's an understanding that it is known that we will conform because that's how we are successful. And if we conform and are successful, ultimately we will comply to whatever legal, statutory, or industry requirement we need to abide by. And that's where I think we should leave it for this episode. And that's where we'll pick up on our fulfillment of this segment of leadership because it is so big.
Right. Well, alignment of value, ethics, and their vision and responsibility. And that's the power combo of the decade, Ian. And
Yes.
that also could absolutely amplify impact. And, since we're talking about impact, let's go where it all begins, Ian, with the individual, with the people. We've touched on a little about this before, but how does your leadership training and onboarding, especially paired with ISO personal certification and your Leaders of Tomorrow cadetship program, prepare individuals not just to lead today, but to govern responsibly across industries in the years to come?
Well, again, it comes back to the very start, and it comes back to the person understanding their strengths, understanding their weaknesses, and understanding within the organizational context
Mhm.
that where they are, their their weaknesses will be continuously improved. Their strengths will be admired and rewarded, but above all, their weaknesses are looked at as a future strength. And when we look at a person's weaknesses, we look at, okay, so it could be communication skills. So they need
Uh-huh.
to hone those skills into such a way as it improves, right? So there's little courses that can be developed in this realm, right? And but for an organisation themselves, the organisation should always be putting additional training in front of their employees for them to keep stepping up that ladder, or as we call it, climbing that mountain, climbing every mountain, okay? And
Mhm.
don't assume you've got to the top until you reach the very, very top of the summit. And that's where we try to demonstrate to every one of our candidates. And when I go out and audit an organisation, that's what I want to hear, is
Uh-huh.
that all employees are being given that additional training. And it was interesting, I was talking to one of the young lads that's a engineer,
Mhm.
and he hadn't actually thought of it that way. And I said, look, this is not a criticism of the organisation or anything like that. And he
Mhm.
said, no, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my hand up for additional training.
Uh-huh.
And this is quite funny actually, but quite serious. There's been a very serious accident here in Australia where they were carting out a big tower for one of the so-called wind turbines. The problem was it got stuck under a bridge, and
Mhm.
it's quite amazing. It's now going to cause 3 months disruption and closure of the highway because of the damage that that turbine has done to the bridge structure. Now, it
Mhm.
just so happens this organisation is just taking on bridge construction as part of their business scope. And I said to the young fellow, I said, where do you think you would sit if that happened to a bridge that you had engineered and seen through to its closure and opening? And he looked at me and he said, wow, that's a brilliant question. And he's going away to think about it. And because that's what all this is about, is future learning, climbing that extra mountain. And
Uh-huh.
that's also important.
Yeah.
I think we should just add there where we're going to be leading is, and
Mhm.
we'll be talking a lot more of human intelligence
Uh-huh.
and the impact that everyone must now begin to understand is
Uh-huh.
that's what we're actually talking about. Now, in some respects, that's very good, but it has to be controlled in such a way as people themselves have full control of it. And
Yeah.
that's where we're going to sort of develop that direction on our next episode.
Uh-huh, right. It has to be ethically done, ethically executed through
Yes,
AI and through human intelligence, as you mentioned. It has to
yes,
be regulated. And I
yes,
like what you mentioned earlier. It's like a leadership pipeline through the strength and dedication of each member of the organization through continuous education and training. And I guess
yes.
that's succession planning done right. It's just inspiring to see, Ian, a model where capability meets character. And once again, you've given us a lot to think about, Ian, from reshaping leadership culture to integrating AI or human intelligence in risk governance and cultivating future leaders while ensuring organizations today meet global standards. So
Yes.
that's turning compliance again into competitive advantage. So thank you so much again, Ian, for continuing to share your wisdom and world-class framework with our audience. It's a pleasure.
And thank you so much.
Happy birthday again from your X-Raised family.
Thank you.
If you're listening and thinking, where do I even start? Might I recommend starting with the ISO certified CBMS online manual Ian just walk us through? It's not just a guide, it's a leadership map So you better go check out and bookmark the link in the description below. Thanks again for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe on xrays.com, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and we'll catch you again next time with more industry trailblazers. This has been your host, Miles. Stay focused and inspired with X-Rays.